this and that and what the fuck else, episode 158. In this one, I'll be talking about the Donbas, quite a few snips about the Donbas, the global revolution, the G7, and then we've got a real funny story from my pet Zatsi. And on the last page, something for the guys. But let's start with a reminder of what the Russians are fighting for. This is the Rostov region, southwestern Russia. Enjoy. That is the Russians' homeland. That is what the West wants to destroy. They want to invade it and plunder it. And this is what the Russians are fighting for. Our first story is about China. And this is the typical reporting that the West is doing about China. Listen to this. In a lot of the world, the clock has hit midnight. China is calling in loans to dozens of countries from Pakistan to Kenya. Keeping schools open, the lights on, and even food on the table is being threatened by debt payments from the 1 trillion Belt and Road project. Sounds so vicious and violent. But what does the West do with all the loans that they pump into these countries? The Chinese loans is invested in infrastructure. The Western loans is pumped into the pockets of corrupt officials. But take note, keeping schools open and lights on and even food on the table is being threatened by debt payments. Sounds so vicious and violent, that evil, bloody Chinese. You should rather take the money from the West so that they can steal all your resources for nothing and corrupt your officials, and they buy big homes and bright shining cars, and the West is happy, and the people don't have food to put on their tables. They don't have schools. They don't have electricity. But let's continue with that one. China is calling in loans to dozens of countries from Pakistan to Kenya. An Associated Press analysis of a dozen countries most indebted to China, including Pakistan, Kenya, Zambia, Laos, and Mongolia, found paying back that debt is consuming an ever greater amount of the tax revenue needed to keep schools open, provide electricity, and pay for food and fuel. And it is draining foreign currency reserves these countries use to pay interest on those loans, leaving some with just months before that money is gone. How cruel is that? And what about all the interest they pay to the West for shit that represents nothing physical in those countries? Just influence that was bought with the billions that the West pumped in. And what they don't tell you is that many of these infrastructure investments that the Chinese do In harbors, for instance, the Chinese takes management of that harbor and control of that harbor. And the normal shipping fees and harbor fees and all the fees are charged to the ships that move in and out. And those fees collected, in other words, the profit that the harbor makes, the revenue that the harbor makes, is deducted from the loan that was given to the country. And once that loan is paid off, the Chinese hands the management of the harbor back to the country and they can continue with it. That is a sensible way of doing it in corrupt countries. But let's continue. In Sri Lanka, a Chinese-funded airport built in the president's hometown away from most of the country's population is so barely used that elephants have been spotted wandering on its tarmac. Cracks are appearing in hydroelectric plants in Uganda and Ecuador, where in March the government got judicial approval for corruption charges tied to the project against a former president now in exile. In Pakistan, a power plant had to shut down for fear it could collapse. In Kenya, the last key mile of a railway were never built due to poor planning and lack of funds. Listen carefully. In Sri Lanka, the Chinese-funded airport was built in the president's hometown. The corrupt president. Not the Chinese, their own president. And these stories of the cracks in the hydroelectric plants in Uganda and Ecuador, I haven't heard anything of it. I have just seen an article where a specific one was commissioned a few weeks ago somewhere here in Africa. But listen to this, where in March the government got judicial approval for corruption charges tied to the project against a former president now in exile. Not corruption from the Chinese, from their own president. And then the one in Pakistan. I haven't heard anything about that, but I'll keep my eyes open and I'll report on it if I see it. And then the Kenya one. The last key miles of a railway were never built due to poor planning and a lack of funds. Who's planning? Where is the funds? That they will never tell you. And then we get to the Donbas and look at this image. On the left was after the Russians drove the Azov Zatzis out of Mariupol. Look at that. And then on the right, that same building, fixed up and repaired by the Russians. May 20, anniversary of Mariupol liberation. Exactly 1 year ago, on May 20, the Azovstal metallurgical plant in Mariupol was completely liberated and the mass surrender of Azov battalion fighters ended. About 2,500 Zatzis laid down their arms in a few days. That was essentially the end of the liberation of Mariupol. And you can look at those images there. An incredible military operation in which Russian troops, smaller in numbers than the Mariupol garrison, were able not only to surround and take the city, but to do so with losses many times less than the enemy. After the liberation and after such a long time, Mariupol was unrecognizable. Public transport is up and running and even trams are running. There is mobile communication. More than half of the schools were rebuilt. As of early May 2023, there is water and electricity in all districts of the city. In the vicinity of Mariupol, in any direction, all roads and bridges within a radius of 100 kilometers were restored. The destroyed houses are gradually being replaced by new ones. And today there are already 300,000 people living in Mariupol, and there will only be more. The Ukrainian regime is gasping with anger as it sees the city being rebuilt and peaceful life returning to it. Last night and this morning, Ukrainian armed formations shelled the outskirts of Mariupol. However, Mariupol lives and will live. And then there's people that are surprised that the Russians are relentlessly hunting those Zotsis down. And they talk shit about peace talks and this talks and that talks. There's no way the Russians are going to negotiate on peace. They will dictate it. And listen to this. This is a guy talking from Bakhmut. On the 28th, they brought in the explosives. They brought it into the middle entrance of the apartment building. And he was telling, they were in the base, they were all herded into the basement of the building, and then the Zotsis collapsed the building with explosives on top of them. The Ukrainian military drove people out of apartments in several high-rise buildings in Bakhmut, giving them only 15 minutes to run away from their houses, and then blew up the buildings. Alexander Stupnikov evacuated from the city. This is what they do there. But they've got the audacity to want to charge Putin for war crimes. But their favorite pets are doing things like this. And this is just for the moment. This image, look at it. That was the hoisting of the Russian flag and the Wagner flags in Bakhmut after the city was taken. This image will go down in history. And then we get to that clown show in Japan, the G7 meeting. Now, if you are an objective person and you look at what is going on in the world, your expectation of the G7 meeting would be that those leaders there would be discussing how to make the lives of their country's citizens better, how to improve trade among them, and things like that. But no. Last year's clown show, where Boris wanted to rip his shirt off and all that type of crap, we thought that was crazy. Listen to this one. The G7 steps up Russia's sanctions, seeks to reduce China's trade dependency. The leaders of the world's richest democracies agreed on Friday to stiffen sanctions against Russia, while a draft communique to be issued after their talk in the Japanese city of Hiroshima stressed the need to reduce reliance on trade with China. What the fuck is that? They want to reduce trade with China, the biggest manufacturing nation in the world. China's manufacturing capacity is more than all the 7 together. Plus, most of their countries rely heavily on consumer goods imported from China. But these intellectual giants, they're actually political masturbators, want to reduce the reliance on trade with China. And as if that is not enough, they want to stiffen the sanctions against Russia. Their economies hasn't been fucked up enough as it is with the existing sanctions. They want to increase the pain level for their citizens. How did we get here? But there's more. The group of 7 leaders who will be joined this weekend by Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky vowed to restrict any exports to Russia that could help it in its 15-month war against Ukraine. This includes exports of industrial machinery, tools and other technology that Russia uses to rebuild its war machine. They said in a joint statement released on Friday, adding that they would pursue moves to restrict Russian revenues from trade in metals and diamonds. And how's that? They're already in deep shit because they haven't got enough aluminium, they haven't got enough tungsten, but they will stiffen the sanctions against Russia. They're paying for Russian gas and oil 3, 4, 5 times more than what they used to pay for it because they buy it from India. And they try to bluff their own citizens, and their own citizens is gullible enough to believe them. But look, I've got a lot of empathy with the citizens of Europe. Let me put it this way, I had a lot of empathy with them last year. This year, I don't have anymore. They deserve what they are getting because they are allowing these clowns free rein. But let's get to this one. Ursula von der Crazy, the pirate of Brussels. Ursula von der Leyen on the need to strengthen the confrontation with China. It's important for us to offer real alternatives to, for example, China's One Belt, One Road initiative. And here is our joint initiative on infrastructure investment outside Europe, outside the G7. We are talking about 600 billion euros package that the EU is launching together with the US and other countries for targeted infrastructure investment in the global south. We will have to take giant steps. And then the commentator says, the West tried to do something like this once before. It was called colonization. How pathetic is this? But their own economies are shot. They like to call them the 7 richest countries in the world. They are the 7 countries with the most debt in the world. And then we get to my favorite topic, the global revolution, and Lavrov is speaking. Lavrov stated that the hopes of integration with the West dashed, and now Russia enters a phase of acute confrontation with an aggressive bloc comprising the United States, the European Union, and NATO. The goal was set loudly and openly to defeat Russia on the battlefield, but not to stop there, and to eliminate Russia as a geopolitical competitor. The West can learn a lot from the Russians when it comes to diplomacy and statesmanship. And Lavrov summed it up perfectly here. And then we get to this one. The EU not planning to reconnect key Russian bank to SWIFT. The European Union will not reconnect Russian state agricultural lender Roselkos Bank to the SWIFT payment system in the immediate future, the Izvestia newspaper reported on Monday, citing an EU Foreign Affairs spokesman. The bank facilitates the majority of transactions involving Russian agricultural exports. SWIFT stopped servicing Roselkos Bank transactions in June of last year. Its reconnection to the system is one of the conditions Moscow has demanded to facilitate the Black Sea initiative brokered by the UN and Turkey. Russia has repeatedly stated that the part of the deal related to removing obstacles to Russian agricultural exports needs to be implemented. It has warned that it could quit the agreement if the situation does not change. And this is what the West does. And Russia was willing to let the grain go from Ukraine. And as we have seen in many reports, that grain, a small single-digit percentage went to the poor countries. The bulk of it was gobbled up by the EU. And This sanctions against SWIFT makes it very difficult for us specifically that I know of, African countries to buy grain and fertilizer from Russia. And I have read that it also complicates it for South America. But the West made the deal with Russia. Russia lets the grain flow from Ukraine, and they will reconnect that agricultural bank to SWIFT. And as usual, Russia kept its part of the deal and the West not. But there was a few interesting comments on this article. Russia thanks you for this. Suicide. I nearly choked on that. The EU is gone. Russia made a mistake of extending the grain deal. Oh dear, best get their grain elsewhere. SWIFT is dead, petrodollar is dead, and the EU is dead, you stupid motherfuckers. Artie, we know that. Are you running out of news to write? Listen, I don't understand what the hell is going on in Europe. But they are sanctioning Russia on SWIFT. The Russians are implementing their own messaging system. The thing is spreading wherever Russia has got trade relations. I'm waiting for it to get into South Africa. It will obviously go into BRICS. Naturally, the mere cards will go into the BRICS countries and all of that. The West has committed suicide. That is what the West did. And then we get to a very interesting thing. Early this morning, I got shaken by my pet Zotsi. And he was jubilating because Greece and Turkey has now blocked the Bosphorus for Iranian ships that deliver weapons to Russia. I read it and I thought to myself, what the hell is this guy talking about? But you guys that are following the channel, remember a while back, he was saying Russia would want to take Moldova because Moldova can control the Black Sea. And I showed you the map. Moldova is not even on the Black Sea. So I read his message and I asked him, do you know where Iran is and where Russia is? Have you looked at a map? And he gave me a clever quip. Now I'm going to show you the map. Look at that. Tehran to Russia. That like a bright yellow stripe through the Caspian Sea. That is the trade route between Russia and Iran. But my Zotsi is over the moon. Greece and Turkey has blocked trade between Russia and Iran by blocking their ships in the Bosphorus. Now look at the next map. And this will give you an idea of the intellectual brilliance of this Zotsi. Look at that. The green line is the route that is in operation between Russia and Iran. But he is of the opinion the Iranians will use this yellow route. Now, I don't want to go to IQ and things like that. But this is what happens when a person reads headlines on MSN. This is what happens. Then he comes up with arguments like that. I hope you enjoyed this little geography lesson. And then we get to the Middle East. And look at that image. The Saudi Crown Prince shakes hands with Syrian President Assad at Arab League summit after 12 years of Syria's suspension. The reason why I mention this is a very important thing. And the West needs to pay attention. They need to pay attention. The Middle East is changing. I listened to a commentator earlier this evening, and the guy said that America better wake up to the realities of the Middle East. Things are changing rapidly in the Middle East, and the Americans is going to find themselves in a very difficult position there if they don't get out, because of all those Arab nations decide that they have had enough of the American bullying there. The Americans will not be able to protect all their bases. But the Americans is clever. That fucking Blinken, he thinks he is, I don't know what, Wonder Man or Captain America or what. They've got a problem. And then we get to Putin. And this is a speech that he made a few days ago. Today we are often told that Russia has started a war. No. Russia, with the help of a special military operation, is trying to stop this war being waged against us, against our people, some of whom, due to historical injustice, ended up outside the borders of the historical Russian state. But they have not ceased to be our people, and Russia is doing everything to protect them. Yes, Russia is experiencing difficult times. But today we are talking about times that have never been easy. But still today is a special moment of our powerful consolidation, the aggravation of our national feeling, the desire to strengthen the foundations of our spirituality, to create the conditions in the economy, in production, in upbringing of our young people, in order to ensure the unconditional future of our country. But the West don't take notice of these things. They carry on with their devious actions. And then this is for my Nazi pet, who tells me the Russian economy is dead. Russia has the lowest inflation in Europe. Inflation in Russia has continued to slow through May. Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin told the Shanghai Business Forum on Tuesday, noting that the indicator is currently the lowest in Europe. As of early May, inflation slowed to 2.3% year over year. This is the lowest figure among all European countries, Mishustin stated. The indicator fell after a sharp drop from 3.51% in March from 10.99% in February. It is currently well below the government target of 5% for the year. In comparison, Switzerland recorded 2.6% inflation in April, the second lowest after Russia. The region's largest economy, Germany, saw prices grow at 7.2%. Mishustin also announced that Russia's unemployment rate had dropped to a record low of 3.5%. Now that is good figures, and far from a collapsed economy. And then we get to the UK, and this is very disturbing. The US and the UK are split on the Ukraine war. The British are more assertive, the Americans more worried about provoking Russia. The UK Special Forces from the British Army's SAS and SRR regiments and the Navy SBS units are operating very close to the front lines in Ukraine. These personnel are serving as key interlocutors between NATO intelligence efforts and Ukrainian forces. They aren't fighting, but their guiding influence on Ukrainian Special Forces activity is evident in the sabotage operations Ukraine has conducted against Russian railway, airfield, fuel and other logistical nodes. And take note, the Special Forces activity is evident in the sabotage operations in Ukraine. This is what the UK specializes in, sabotage. But the UK is cruising for a bruising. Many interviews that I've listened to, the Russian people refers to the Anglo-Saxons with disdain. And this stupid leadership in Britain is fueling the fires. But listen to this. Ben Wallace to push ahead with British Army cuts. The Defence Secretary resists pressure to rethink plans devised before Ukraine. UK Defence Secretary intends to reduce the size of the army despite pressure from senior generals. Ben Wallace says he wants to rebalance the numbers of infantry and artillery. The proposal is to reduce the number of infantry and increase the number of artillery. Ben Wallace intends to cut Britain's troop count to the lowest since the Napoleonic era. Now, that is from the clown that is spoiling for a fight with Russia. The British Army cannot even fill a medium-sized soccer stadium, but they want to fight with Russia. They built an aircraft carrier that never went to sea properly. The last time they tried to take it to sea to visit America, it was out for half an hour and it broke down and was towed back to harbour. Now they are stripping it for spare parts to maintain the other one. This is a brilliant UK. You must ask yourself this. Why the hell are they spoiling for a fight with Russia? Why? I read another article yesterday about military guys talking about this, and the guy said it will take one Poseidon torpedo, just one, and the UK is off the map and gone. But no, this cocky British, they keep on. And then we get to the Ukraine, and this is, you might have seen it already, I think I mentioned it once. This was a gift that Zelensky gave to the Pope, and on that image there is the Mother Mary, and there's just a black figure where Jesus is supposed to be. What went through his fucking mind when he decided to give that to the Pope? But nothing can go through his mind because it's too full of white dust there. The icon that Zelensky gave the Pope is beyond sacrilegious and proves without a doubt that he is a Satanist piece of shit. Same goes for the Pope for accepting it. I literally had people ask me if it was a fake. It is not. May God give them everything they deserve. Excellent article by John Varoli about Zelensky's antics at the G7 and Vatican. Can you believe it? And then we get to South Africa, and this is a sad one. And this was just a commemoration. 40 years ago, an ANC car bomb did that in Church Street. I'm not going to read the whole article, we all know about it and so forth. But it's just a reminder, the legacy of the ANC. And then we get to the final page, and this is for the guys. And look at this, beautiful model, nice photograph, well cropped, well lighted. I like it. We need something pretty to make us guys smile. We're almost men, not confused. We know what a woman looks like. Please give me a like and a subscribe and share the thing. It's really important that you share and like, because the algorithms don't like me. They don't like the news I bring. Enjoy your day.